The rain fell hard against the glass walls of the Lynn family banquet hall. Inside, the air was colder than the storm outside. Emma Lynn stood in the center of the room, her fingers clenched so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Around her, the board members of Lynn Group whispered in low, sharp voices. Their eyes carried doubt and disgust. At the head of the long table, Daniel Lynn's face was darker than the night. "Emma," he said slowly, each word heavy with disappointment, "I'll give you one last chance. Did you transfer the company funds?" Emma's heart pounded painfully. In her previous life, no. In this moment, she still believed that telling the truth would save her. "I didn't do it," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Dad, someone framed me. Please check the..." Enough. The slap of Daniel's palm against the table echoed through the hall. Beside him, Grace Lynn gently touched his arm, her voice soft and concerned, the perfect stepmother. "Daniel, don't be too angry," Grace said with a sigh. "Emma is still young. Maybe she just made a mistake." Every word sounded like kindness. Every word pushed the knife deeper. Emma's chest tightened. She turned desperately toward the only person who might still stand by her. "Lily, you believe me, right?" Lily Lynn's eyes were already red with tears. She looked fragile, pitiful, the perfect innocent younger sister. But the words that left her mouth shattered Emma's world. "Sister, I saw the transfer record in your office." The room exploded into murmurs. Emma froze. "No, that's impossible," her voice cracked. "Lily, you know I would never." Lily lowered her head, shoulders trembling. "I didn't want to say anything," she whispered weakly. "But I can't lie to Dad." The final thread snapped. Emma turned slowly toward Grace. For just a brief second, so fast no one else noticed, Grace smiled. Cold. Victorious. Everything suddenly made sense. But it was too late. Daniel's voice came down like a judge's hammer. "From today onward," he said harshly, "Emma Lynn is removed from all positions in Lynn Group." Emma's breath stopped. "And," he continued, his tone turning icy, "you are no longer my daughter." The words hit harder than any slap. The world around Emma began to blur. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking apart. "You don't believe me?" Daniel didn't even look at her. Security. 2 guards stepped forward immediately. The rain outside grew louder. An hour later, Emma stood alone on the empty roadside, soaked to the bone. The bright lights of the Lynn mansion behind her felt like a distant dream. Her phone screen glowed weakly in her hand. She had proof. In her previous life, in this very moment, she would have run back, desperate, screaming her innocence while waving the evidence. She would have begged. She would have cried. And she would still lose everything. Emma's lips trembled. Her chest hurt so much she could barely breathe. "Why?" she whispered to the empty night. "Why won't anyone believe me?" A pair of headlights suddenly cut through the rain. Too bright. Too fast. Emma turned. Pain. Darkness. Silence. Emma's eyes snapped open. She inhaled sharply, her whole body jerking upright. The familiar crystal chandelier above her shimmered in warm golden light. Her room. The Lynn mansion. Emma's fingers trembled violently as she looked down at her hands. Dry. Uninjured. Alive. Her breathing grew uneven. "No, no, this isn't." Her phone suddenly vibrated beside her. The screen lit up. 8:10 p.m. Emma's pupils shrank. This time. This exact time. It was the night everything began. Footsteps approached outside her door. Then. Knock knock. "Emma," Grace's gentle voice came through the door, warm as ever. "The board meeting is about to start. Everyone is waiting for you." Emma's heart should have raced. She should have panicked. Instead. Slowly. Very slowly. Emma's expression went completely calm. Her fingers reached for the phone. On the screen was the evidence file, the one thing that could clear her name. In her previous life, she had protected it like her last breath. This time. Emma stared at it for a long moment. Then. Delete. The file disappeared. Outside the door, Grace called again, slightly impatient now. "Emma." Emma stood up quietly. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, colder, sharper, awake. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Coming," she said softly. This time. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't beg. She would simply step back and watch them destroy themselves. The Lin family banquet hall glowed with warm golden light. But beneath the polished marble floor and expensive smiles, tension quietly spread like cracks in ice. Emma Lin walked in. Every step was steady. Every breath was controlled. In her previous life, this room had felt like a courtroom waiting to sentence her. Her palms would have been sweaty, her eyes red from holding back tears. But now, she was calm. Too calm. At the head of the table, Daniel Lin frowned slightly when he saw her. Something felt different. "Emma," he said, voice sharp but restrained, "you're late." In the past, she would have immediately apologized. This time, Emma simply inclined her head slightly. "My mistake, father." Her tone was respectful, polite, and strangely distant. Grace Lin's eyes flickered. She was the first to notice. Emma walked to her seat and sat down quietly, folding her hands on the table. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look defensive. She looked like someone watching a performance she had already memorized. Lily Lin bit her lip. This wasn't how things were supposed to feel. "Sister," Lily said softly, her voice carrying gentle concern, "you don't look well. Are you feeling stressed lately?" There it was. The same opening move. In Emma's previous life, she had rushed to explain herself, stumbling into the trap Lily carefully prepared. But now, Emma slowly turned her head. Her gaze was clear and unreadable. "I'm fine," she said simply. "Nothing more." Lily's smile stiffened for a fraction of a second. Grace leaned forward slightly, her elegant face full of motherly worry. "Emma, if there's anything troubling you, you must tell the family. We're all on your side." Emma almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she lowered her eyes modestly. "Of course, Aunt Grace." "Aunt. Not Mom." The word landed softly, but it was sharp enough for Grace to feel it. Grace's fingers tightened around her teacup. Interesting. Very interesting. The meeting began. Department reports. Financial updates. Investment plans. Emma listened quietly, her mind working far faster than anyone in the room could guess. In her previous life, she had been too emotional to notice the small cracks. But now she saw everything, including the moment Lily subtly slid a USB drive toward the finance director. Emma's eyes flickered. There it is. Right on schedule. The accusation would come soon. But this time, Emma calmly reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, not to defend herself, to prepare. Across the table, Grace was watching her carefully now. This girl had changed. After the meeting ended, the family gathered in the sitting room. Grandmother Lin sat in her usual chair by the window, her sharp old eyes observing everything. Emma approached and bowed slightly. "Grandmother." The old lady looked up, surprised. In recent months, Emma had been distant and quietly hurt. But today, her posture was straight. Her eyes were clear. Grandmother Lin studied her for a long moment. "You've grown calmer," she said slowly. Emma gave a faint smile. "People grow, grandmother." Across the room, Lily felt a strange chill run down her spine. Before she could think too much, she quickly walked over and linked arms with Daniel. "Dad," she said sweetly, "there's something I need to report about the finance department." Emma lowered her gaze. Right on time. But this time, she was ready. Later that night, Emma stood alone on the balcony, the city lights flickering below like distant stars. Behind her, footsteps approached. Steady. Unhurried. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Ryan Cole. The cold young CEO of Cole Group. In her previous life, their paths had barely crossed. This time, Emma's eyes darkened slightly. Some chess pieces were too valuable not to move early. Ryan stopped beside her, his sharp gaze resting on her profile. "You're very calm tonight, Miss Lin." Emma finally turned her head. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, Something sharp passed between them, recognition without understanding. Emma's lips curved faintly. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "do you believe people can change overnight?" Ryan studied her for 2 seconds too long. "Rarely," he replied. Emma looked back toward the glittering city. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Then maybe tonight will be an exception." Inside the mansion, Lily's carefully planted trap was already beginning to move. And this time, Emma was the one pulling the strings. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Lynn mansion, warm and gentle. But inside the breakfast room, the atmosphere was anything but. Emma Lynn sat quietly at the long dining table, stirring her coffee with slow, unhurried movements. Across from her, Lily Lynn kept sneaking glances, her smile sweet but her fingers nervously gripping her spoon. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Daniel Lynn lowered the morning newspaper with a faint frown. "Lily," he said, voice serious, "come to my study after breakfast." Lily's hand froze. "Dad." Daniel didn't answer. His expression had already turned cold again. Grace Lynn, sitting elegantly beside him, felt her heartbeat skip. This wasn't part of the plan. Her eyes subtly moved toward Emma. But Emma simply lifted her cup and took a calm sip of coffee, as if none of this concerned her. Too calm. Grace's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. 20 minutes later. Inside Daniel's study. The heavy wooden door closed with a soft but final click. Lily stood in the center of the room, her face pale. Daniel tossed a printed document onto the desk. It slid across the polished surface and stopped in front of her. "Explain this." Lily looked down. Her pupils shrank. It was a transaction record. A small one, only a minor irregularity in the finance department. Normally, no one would notice. But today, sweat formed on Lily's back. I don't understand," she said weakly. Daniel's voice hardened. "This account is under your supervision." Silence filled the room. Outside the door, Grace stood frozen in the hallway, her elegant mask nearly cracking. This shouldn't be happening yet. They were supposed to frame Emma first. So why? Her gaze slowly shifted down the corridor. At the far end, Emma stood by the window, quietly watering a small potted plant. As if she had been there the whole time. As if she had nothing to do with anything. Grace's stomach dropped. Inside the study, Lily's eyes were already turning red. "Dad, I really didn't notice this," she said pitifully. "Maybe someone in the department made a mistake." Daniel stared at her for a long moment. His disappointment was obvious. "I'll give you 1 week to fix it," he said finally. Relief flooded Lily so fast her knees nearly went weak. "Yes, Dad. I will." But as she turned to leave, Daniel added coldly, "Don't disappoint me again." The words cut deep. That afternoon, Emma sat in a quiet cafe near the business district, sunlight falling softly across her face. Across from her sat Ryan Cole. His dark eyes were fixed on her with sharp curiosity. "You asked to meet me," he said calmly. "Miss Lynn, I don't believe in wasting time." Emma smiled faintly. Straight to the point. Just like she remembered. "I heard Cole Group is looking for a new partner for the East Harbor project," she said. Ryan's gaze sharpened slightly. "And?" Emma gently pushed a thin folder across the table. Inside was a perfectly organized market analysis. Detailed. Precise. Impressive. Ryan didn't touch it immediately. Instead, he looked at her. "You prepared this overnight?" Emma met his eyes calmly. "Yes." Silence stretched between them. Ryan finally opened the folder. The more he read, the deeper his gaze became. This wasn't something an ordinary rich young lady could produce. After a long moment, he closed the file. "You're hiding something, Miss Lynn." Emma's expression didn't change. A soft breeze moved the curtain beside them. "I'm just preparing for the future," she said quietly. Ryan leaned back slightly, studying her like a puzzle he hadn't solved yet. Interesting. Very interesting. That evening, in her bedroom, Lily paced back and forth anxiously. "This is weird, too weird." She suddenly stopped and grabbed her phone, quickly opening the finance system. Her fingers moved fast. Checking. Searching. Verifying. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Her breathing slowly became uneven. Because she clearly remembered. She had planted something in Emma's department yesterday. So why? Why was the first irregularity found in her own area instead? Lily's fingers trembled. Outside her door, Emma stood quietly in the dim hallway. Her expression calm. Cold. Patient. In her hand, her phone screen glowed softly. On it was a scheduled email. Recipient. Internal Audit Department. Send time. Tomorrow morning 8 a.m. Emma's lips curved slightly. This was only the first crack. Soon. The perfect Lynn family illusion would begin to crumble. And this time, she wouldn't have to say a single word. The Lynn mansion had always been a place of quiet control. But this morning, the air felt tight. Unsettled. At exactly 8 a.m., the internal audit email was delivered. Emma Lynn sat peacefully in the breakfast room, spreading jam on her toast with slow, careful movements. Across the table, Lily Lynn was already on her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly. Until suddenly, her face turned white. The phone slipped slightly in her hand. Grace Lynn noticed immediately. "What is it?" she asked smoothly, though her eyes had already sharpened. Lily's lips trembled. "Mom, the audit department, they're reviewing the East Harbor accounts." The knife in Grace's hand paused mid-air. For the first time, real alarm flashed across her elegant face. That project. That was where they planned to frame Emma. Grace's gaze slowly lifted. And landed on Emma. But Emma was simply eating her breakfast quietly, posture perfect, expression gentle and harmless. Too harmless. Grace's heartbeat began to pound. Half an hour later. In the company headquarters. The audit department was already in motion. Files were pulled. Accounts were reviewed. Department managers whispered nervously in the hallway. Inside her office, Lily paced back and forth, her calm mask completely gone. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. She had double-checked everything. Her setup was flawless. So why had the investigation started early? Her fingers suddenly stopped moving. Unless someone knew. A cold chill ran down her spine. Meanwhile, Emma stood by the large window in the executive lounge, looking down at the busy city below. Behind her, the door opened quietly. Ryan Cole stepped inside. "You move faster than I expected," he said calmly. Emma didn't turn. "You're giving me too much credit, Mr. Cole." Ryan walked closer, stopping just behind her shoulder. His voice lowered slightly. "The audit email was sent from an anonymous account routed through 3 servers," he said. "Very clean work." Emma finally turned her head. Their eyes met again. Sharp. Measured. Ryan's gaze held clear interest now. "You're not the quiet young lady everyone thinks you are," he said. Emma's lips curved faintly. "And you're more observant than most CEOs." For a brief moment, something almost like amusement flickered in Ryan's eyes. Then, footsteps hurried down the hallway outside. Grace. She pushed open the lounge door without knocking. Her expression was still elegant. But her eyes were no longer calm. She stopped short when she saw Ryan standing beside Emma. "Mr. Cole," Grace said smoothly, recovering quickly. "What a coincidence." Ryan gave a polite but distant nod. "Mrs. Lynn." Grace's gaze shifted to Emma. Warm smile. Sharp eyes. "Emma, dear," she said gently, "the audit department is asking for some internal clarifications. Since you've been assisting with financial coordination lately, why don't you come with me?" It sounded reasonable. Perfectly reasonable. In Emma's previous life, she would have panicked right now. She would have followed nervously. And walked straight into Grace's trap. But this time, Emma simply blinked softly, then nodded. "Of course, Aunt Grace." Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. He was starting to see the pattern. Emma wasn't being cornered. She was walking in willingly. Inside the small conference room, Grace closed the door slowly. The moment the lock clicked, her warm expression disappeared. "What are you planning, Emma?" she asked quietly. No pretense now. No sweetness. Emma stood calmly across the table. Her voice was soft. I don't understand what you mean. Grace's eyes turned cold. You've been too quiet lately. She stepped closer. Each word sharper than the last. The audit. Lily's mistake being exposed, your sudden cooperation with Mr. Cole. Grace stopped right in front of her. You think I won't notice? Silence filled the room. For 2 long seconds. Emma said nothing. Then slowly, very slowly, she smiled. Not innocent. Not gentle. Something deeper. Something that made Grace's stomach suddenly drop. Emma leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Grace. Grace's breath caught. Emma's eyes were calm. Too calm. Are you afraid? The room went dead silent. For the first time in years. Grace Lynn felt a chill crawl up her spine. And outside the conference room, Ryan stood quietly in the hallway, listening, watching, and realizing. The Lynn family storm was only just beginning. The silence inside the conference room lingered long after Emma spoke. Grace Lynn stared at her. For the first time in years, the elegant stepmother felt something dangerously close to unease. But she recovered quickly. Grace slowly straightened, her lips curving into a cold smile. You've grown bold, she said lightly. Be careful, Emma. Confidence without strength is just foolishness. Emma did not respond. She simply lowered her eyes again, returning to that quiet, obedient appearance. As if the sharp moment from seconds ago had never happened. Grace's fingers curled slightly. This girl was becoming troublesome. By afternoon, the audit had begun creating visible waves inside Lynn Group. Managers whispered in the corridors. Emails flew back and forth. And most importantly, Daniel Lynn was no longer calm. Inside his office, the atmosphere was heavy. Grace sat across from him, posture elegant but her heart beating faster than usual. The auditors are being overly cautious, she said smoothly. It's just a minor discrepancy. Daniel's expression was dark. It better be. He tapped the report on his desk. Why is Lily's department showing repeated irregularities? Grace's smile almost froze. Repeated. That wasn't supposed to happen. She had checked everything last night. Unless. Her mind flashed briefly to Emma's calm face. No. Impossible. Grace forced herself to remain composed. I'll have Lily review it immediately, she said. Daniel gave a short nod, but the disappointment in his eyes was already there. And once planted, doubt never disappeared easily. That evening, the Lynn family dining room was unusually quiet. The long table was filled with expensive dishes, but no one had much appetite. Lily sat stiffly in her chair, her face pale despite her carefully applied makeup. Across from her, Emma ate slowly and quietly, as usual. Grace watched both girls carefully. Every movement, every expression. She was searching for cracks. But Emma gave her nothing. Perfect composure. Perfect obedience. It was almost infuriating. Finally, Daniel put down his chopsticks. Lily. Lily's shoulders jumped slightly. Yes, Dad. Daniel's voice was calm but heavy. You've been distracted lately. The words were simple. But they hit like a hammer. Lily's eyes instantly reddened. I'm sorry, Dad. I'll fix everything. I promise. Her voice trembled just enough. In the past, this would have softened Daniel immediately. But tonight, Daniel only nodded faintly. See that you do. Grace's heart sank. The emotional trick was losing its effect. After dinner, Emma stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing gently against her face. The city lights below flickered like distant stars. Behind her, the balcony door slid open. Ryan Cole stepped out. He leaned casually against the railing, his sharp gaze studying her profile. You're very patient, he said. Emma didn't look surprised. She had expected him. Good things take time, she replied softly. Ryan watched her for a moment. Then he said quietly, the audit team received an anonymous evidence package this afternoon. Emma's fingers paused slightly on the balcony rail. But her voice remained calm. Oh. Ryan's eyes narrowed just a fraction. It directly connects to Lily's department. Silence stretched between them. The night wind moved gently through Emma's hair. Finally, she turned her head slightly toward him. Her expression was peaceful. "Mr. Cole," she said, voice light, "sometimes the truth simply has a way of surfacing." Ryan held her gaze. Long. Searching. And for the first time. He smiled faintly. Not cold. Not distant. Interested. Very interested. Inside the mansion, Grace stood alone in her study, staring at the newly delivered audit summary. Her elegant mask had finally cracked. Because buried in the report was evidence that should not exist yet. Her fingers slowly tightened around the paper. Her voice dropped into a whisper. "Emma." Memory flashed through her mind. Emma's calm eyes. Her quiet smile. Her strange confidence. Grace's pupils shrank suddenly. Unless. Her breath caught sharply. "No," Grace whispered. But the thought refused to leave. She slowly lifted her head toward the dark window. And murmured the words she never thought she would say. "You came back, didn't you?" In her bedroom across the hall, Emma stood silently by the window. The city lights reflected in her calm eyes. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because the fall of the Lynn family had already begun. The Lynn mansion had never felt so tense. Morning light filtered through the tall windows, but no one in the house felt its warmth. Grace Lynn did not sleep the entire night. She sat in her study, the audit report spread across the desk like a silent accusation. Every line of evidence pointed in the same direction, toward Lily's department, toward the financial manipulations that were never meant to surface so soon. And toward one impossible conclusion. Emma knew. Grace's fingers slowly tightened. If Emma truly remembered, then everything was already out of control. At 9 a.m. sharp, the Lynn family was summoned to the main sitting room. Daniel Lynn stood by the window, his back stiff, his expression darker than anyone had seen in years. On the table in front of him lay a thick stack of documents. Lily's face was already pale. Grace remained composed on the surface, but the tension in her shoulders was unmistakable. Emma entered last. Calm. Quiet. As if this was just another ordinary morning. Grandmother Lynn sat in her usual chair, her sharp eyes moving slowly between each family member. Unlike the others, her gaze lingered on Emma for a long moment. Thoughtful. Almost approving. Daniel finally spoke. "The audit team has completed their preliminary findings." His voice was cold. Heavy. Lily's fingers trembled in her lap. "Dad. I can explain." "Then explain," Daniel cut in sharply. Silence fell like a blade. Lily's eyes instantly filled with tears. I didn't mean for the accounts to look like that. Maybe someone in the department made a mistake." Her voice shook perfectly. Fragile. Pitiful. But this time, Daniel did not soften. Instead, he slowly pushed one document forward. "Then explain why the access logs show your personal authorization." Lily's breath stopped. Grace's heart dropped. That log. It shouldn't have been included yet. Unless someone deliberately sent it. Across the room, Emma stood quietly, hands folded, eyes lowered. Like she had nothing to do with any of this. But Grace was now absolutely certain. This was her doing. "Dad. Lily's voice broke apart. For the first time, real panic surfaced. Daniel's disappointment was no longer hidden. "You've embarrassed the family." The words were simple. But devastating. Lily's tears finally fell for real. Grace knew the situation was slipping fast. She stood smoothly. "Daniel," she said gently, "Lily is still young. Mistakes. Enough." Daniel's voice cracked through the room like thunder. Grace froze. Daniel rarely raised his voice. But today, his patience was gone. Then, slowly, his gaze shifted. Toward Emma. For a brief moment, the room held its breath. "Emma," Daniel said, tone unreadable, "you've been assisting the finance department recently. Do you have anything to say? In her previous life, this was the moment Emma had desperately defended herself. The moment she cried. The moment she lost everything. But now, Emma slowly lifted her eyes. Calm. Clear. Unshaken. She stepped forward quietly and placed a thin folder onto the table. I believe this belongs here, she said softly. Grace's pupils shrank. Daniel opened the folder. Inside was the complete financial trail. Every transfer. Every manipulation. Every hidden step. Perfectly organized. The room went dead silent. Lily collapsed back into her chair, face completely drained of color. Grace's elegant mask finally cracked. Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he closed the file. His voice came out low and hoarse. Why didn't you say anything earlier? Emma met his gaze. For the first time since her rebirth, there was emotion in her eyes. Not anger. Not hatred. Just quiet exhaustion. I thought, she said gently, it was better for the truth to speak for itself. The words landed heavily in the room. Grandmother Lynn slowly nodded. Approval clear in her eyes. Grace, however, felt cold from head to toe. Because she understood. Emma hadn't fought back. She hadn't argued. She hadn't exposed them early. She had simply stepped back and waited for them to fall on their own. That evening, police cars stopped quietly outside the Lynn mansion gates. Lily locked herself in her room, completely broken. Grace sat alone in the dark study, her face pale but strangely calm now. The game was over. And she had lost. On the balcony. The same balcony where everything once began. Emma stood quietly, the night wind brushing softly against her hair. Behind her, footsteps approached. Ryan Cole stopped beside her. You won, he said. Emma looked out at the city lights. Her voice was soft. I didn't win. Ryan raised an eyebrow slightly. Emma's gaze was distant. I just finally stopped losing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan said quietly, So, what will you do now, Miss Lynn? Emma's lips curved into a faint, peaceful smile. This time, there was no desperation. No fear. No need to fight. I'll live well, she said simply. And for the first time since the night her world once ended, Emma Lynn turned and walked forward into her new life. Free.